Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into a challenge that really sits at the crossroads of corporate strategy and accounting. It's all about assessing divisional performance.
Right.
Think about a big company, lots of different units, maybe appliances, robotics, financial services, whatever. How do you really know which parts are performing well and which ones are, well, just coasting?
It sounds like it should be simple, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Just look at the profits.
Exactly. But it's way trickier than that. We've got this great visual overview from our study material, and it really maps out why assessing performance is such a complex battlefield.
Yeah, and what's really interesting, I think, is that the source material doesn't just focus on how to measure. It really digs into the difficulties, the problems baked into the whole process.
Okay.
You start with this big strategic decision,
Yeah.
decentralization, letting managers manage their own patch, and suddenly you're forced into this tricky debate about different ways to measure them, like return on investment versus residual income.
Right. So, okay, let's unpack that. Our mission for this deep dive is basically to follow that visual map. We need to get our heads around why companies decentralize in the first place, then why it's so hard to measure performance fairly, and finally, how these two big tools, ROI and RI, try and sometimes fail to actually put a number on it. To really get why measurement is so tough, we have to start where the visual does. Top left, decentralization. Why do companies even do this? Why push decision-making power down the ladder? What's the hoped-for payoff?
Well, the main drivers are usually things like speed, better local knowledge, and motivating those managers winning the divisions. That's the core package of benefits they're after.
Makes sense. Empower the people on the ground.
Exactly. They're closer to the market. They should make better decisions faster. But, giving up that control isn't free. The source points out clear costs. You lose some central oversight, definitely. And maybe even more importantly, you risk different divisions pulling in different directions, losing coordination.
Okay, so there's a trade-off.
A big one.
Yeah.
And it immediately means you need new ways to track performance, new measures. And you also need certain conditions in place for it to even work. Like you actually need capable managers down there.
Ah, okay.
And that brings us to this really key idea the source highlights. Meaningful decentralization. It's not just about saying, okay, you're in charge. If the managers aren't actually up to the job, or if the internal accounting systems can't cope with tracking things properly at that level,
Then it all falls apart.
pretty much, you end up measuring just noise and chaos, not real performance. If that basic structure, that decentralization, isn't meaningful because the conditions aren't right, then frankly, all the performance metrics we're about to discuss are kind of pointless.
So decentralization is the why, giving people freedom. But immediately you hit this wall of accountability. If the division manager has the freedom, how do you fairly measure what they do with it? That's the next step, right? Divisional performance.
That's it. And yeah, the source talks about the characteristics of a good measure. You want it timely, understandable, reliable, all that. But the bit that really defines the difficulty, the thing that makes this whole area so problematic, is this concept of controllable and traceable profits.
Controllable and traceable. Okay, break that down.
It's absolutely key. Controllable means the profit or the costs affecting that profit have to be things the manager can actually influence through their own decisions. And traceable means you can clearly link that profit or cost directly to that specific division, not just, general corporate muck.
Right. If you don't meet that test.
The measure becomes fundamentally unfair. You're judging someone on something they couldn't impact.
Okay, let's make that concrete. Say a division's profits drop. The manager might have actually done a brilliant job controlling the costs they control, maybe boosting sales. But the profit number looks bad because, I don't know, head office suddenly decided to double the internal rent charged to that division for its building.
Exactly. Or they changed how they allocate central IT costs, and suddenly this division gets hit with a massive extra charge.
And the division manager has zero say in that rent or that allocation method.
Precisely. So that part of the profit or loss is no longer controllable by them.
And the moment you use that uncontrollable element to judge their performance or decide their bonus, well, you're penalizing the wrong person.
It completely undermines the whole point of decentralizing in the first place, which was to empower and motivate them based on their actions. So the core difficulty is designing measures that genuinely reflect only the outcomes of the decisions that manager actually made. It's much harder than it sounds.
Okay, so that difficulty, defining what's truly controllable, leads us straight to the tools people use to try and quantify performance anyway. The two main contenders: return on investment, ROI, and residual income.
Yep, the big two. These are the metrics designed, or at least intended, to put a number on that divisional success despite the difficulties.
Let's tackle ROI first. Return on investment. It's probably the one most people have heard of. Simple ratio, right? Profit relative to the money tied up in the division.
That's the basic idea. For return on investment, ROI, the core calculation is profit divided by investment. Seems straightforward, but the source is quick to point out the devil's in the details, especially around defining that the investment, or the components of capital employed.
What kind of details?
Well, like what assets do you actually include in that investment base? And crucially, how do you value them? Do you use the original purchase price, the historical cost, or what it would cost to replace them now? Or maybe the written down value after depreciation, the net book value.
And that choice matters.
Hugely, because it affects behavior. For example, let's say the company uses net book value. An older division, one with ancient machinery that's almost fully depreciated on the books, will have a tiny investment base. So even a modest profit can make their ROI percentage look fantastic.
Compared to a newer division that just spent a fortune on new kit.
Exactly. The new division has a massive investment base, so its ROI looks much lower, even if it's actually operating more efficiently in real terms. The metric ends up biased towards just being old, not necessarily being good.
Okay, that's a tricky valuation issue. But ROI's main advantage is comparison, isn't it? A 15% ROI is 15% whether the division is big or small. It seems useful for that.
It is. That comparability is definitely one of its big advantages. It's intuitive.
So why the need for an alternative like ROI? Where does ROI go wrong behaviorally?
This is the classic problem. The main disadvantage of ROI is what's called the goal congruence problem, or rather the lack of goal congruence.
Meaning the manager's goals don't align with the company's goals.
Precisely. Imagine you're managing a division that's already doing really well, generating a, let's say, 25% ROI. High performer. Now, a new investment opportunity comes along. It's a solid project, expected to return 20%. Now, 20% is probably well above the company's overall cost of capital. Maybe the company only needs a 12% return to be happy. So for the company as a whole, this project is a definite go.
Makes perfect sense for the company.
But what about for the manager who's judged on their 25% ROI? If they take on this new project that only yields 20%, it's going to drag down their average ROI. Maybe it drops to 24%.
So even though 20% is great for the company, it makes the manager look slightly worse.
Exactly. So the manager, acting rationally based on how they are measured and rewarded, is incentivized to reject that perfectly good, profitable project.
Wow. So ROI is actually encouraging managers to turn down business that the company wants.
That's the potential behavioral trap. They reject good opportunities just to protect their percentage score. It's rational for them, but bad for the company overall.
Okay, that's a pretty serious flaw. So if ROI has this behavioral poison pill baked in, what was the fix? That must be where residual income comes in.
That's the idea behind residual income, RI. It was developed specifically to try and overcome that goal congruence problem. RI shifts the focus away from a percentage ratio towards an absolute dollar figure.
How does it do that? What's the calculation?
The calculation takes the division's controllable profit, and then it subtracts a charge for the capital that the division is using. This is often called an imputed interest charge.
Imputed interest, like a theoretical cost.
Sort of. It's calculated as the division's investment base, that capital employed figure we talked about, multiplied by a required rate of return, usually the company's cost of capital, maybe plus a bit.
Yeah.
So profit minus investment X required rate of return.
Okay, so you're directly charging the division for the resources it ties up.
Exactly. You make them financially accountable for the capital they consume. And the main advantage here is behavioral. With RI, a manager is motivated to accept any project that earns more than that imputed interest charge.
Why?
Because if the project's return is higher than the charge, even if it's lower than the division's current average, it will still generate a positive absolute dollar amount of residual income. It adds to their total RI dollars. So the manager is motivated to maximize the total dollar value generated, not just the percentage rate.
So that 20% project we talked about. If the cost of capital charge is, say, 12%, the manager would take it under RI because it adds positive dollars to their score.
Precisely. It aligns their incentive with the company's economic interest. Take any project that earns more than it costs. Goal congruence achieved, potentially.
Okay, RI sounds pretty smart then. It fixes that big ROI problem. So why isn't ROI just gone? Why do companies still use it? What are the downsides, the disadvantages of RI?
Well, RI's main weakness comes from the fact that it is an absolute dollar measure. Let's say Division A generates $5 million in residual income, and Division B generates $1 million.
Division A sounds better.
Maybe. But what if Division A is massive, using 10 times the capital of Division B? That $5 million RI might actually represent a less efficient use of capital than Division B's $1 million. Because it's an absolute number, RI makes it much harder to compare the performance of divisions of vastly different sizes.
Right, whereas ROI, being a percentage, was actually quite good for that size comparison.
Exactly. ROI gives you that relative efficiency measure more easily. So neither metric is perfect, you see. They each have strengths and weaknesses.
Okay, this has been really clarifying. We basically went from this big strategic idea, giving managers freedom with decentralization, straight into the messy reality of trying to measure that freedom fairly, hitting those controllable and traceable issues, and
Yeah.
ending up with these two main tools, ROI versus RI, each with its own benefits and behavioral traps.
Yeah, the whole journey highlights this fundamental tension.
Yeah.
You want to give autonomy, but you absolutely need accountability. Finding a measure that supports both without creating weird incentives is the real challenge.
And tying it back, that choice between ROI and RI isn't just some arcane accounting decision, is it?
Not at all. As we saw, it directly shapes how managers behave. It influences whether they chase percentage points, potentially rejecting good projects, or focus on generating absolute dollar value for the company. That measurement system is like one of the most powerful levers a company has, even in a supposedly decentralized structure. It really steers the ship.
So maybe a final thought for you listening. Given how fundamentally difficult we've seen it is to even define profits that are truly controllable and traceable before you even get to the ROI or RI calculation, perhaps the choice between ROI and RI isn't purely about which formula looks better on paper. Maybe it's more about which one, in your specific company context, does a better job of motivating managers to make decisions that genuinely align with what you wanted from meaningful decentralization in the first place. If the measure feels unfair or it's easy to game, then it doesn't matter how elegant the math is, the system is probably failing its real purpose. Something to think about next time you see those divisional reports.